Welcome back, everyone already subscribed to Expose Cheaters by NDU Tale. Thank you. Your time, trust, and your comments keep this community alive. As you listen, share your thoughts, feelings, and lessons below, so we can learn together. Settle in. The truth and the twist are coming. Let's get into it. She stood in our living room in Pearland, arms folded, and told her cousin and brother to throw my clothes into black trash bags like I was a squatter. She didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She didn't even look embarrassed. "If you don't like how I've been living, Marcus, you can leave," she said while they dragged 8 years of my life to the driveway. On our anniversary, the house we picked together suddenly wasn't mine anymore. I slept in my car that night outside the same garage I used to pull into after 12-hour shifts, feeling like a stranger in my own story. Here's how it happened. For 6 months before that night, my wife Danielle had one answer whenever I reached for her in bed: not tonight. At first, it sounded harmless. She worked long shifts at a clinic in Houston, and exhaustion is real. I told myself love wasn't measured by physical closeness alone. I rubbed her shoulders without expecting anything. I cooked dinner more often. I started leaving small notes in her purse. But not tonight became a wall. It wasn't tiredness in her voice. It was far away. She would turn her back to me and scroll her phone, her screen lighting up her face while I stared at the ceiling. If you've ever been told not tonight and felt something deeper was wrong, hit that like button right now and comment, "I see it now." If you've ever ignored red flags because you love too hard, trust me, this story gets worse before it gets better. The rejection wasn't loud. It was quiet and steady, like a leak in the ceiling that stains everything slowly. She stopped laughing at my jokes. She stopped asking about my day at the warehouse. She started taking her phone into the bathroom. Once, I walked past the door and heard her laugh, a deep, real laugh I hadn't heard in months. When she came out, her face was flat again. I asked who she was talking to. "Just work," she said, brushing past me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe I wasn't losing my wife in real time. We met years earlier in Dallas, when neither of us had much. I was fixing cars out of my uncle's driveway, and she was finishing school. We built our life from scratch. When we moved to Pearland, we said it felt like stepping into our future. The house wasn't huge, but it was ours. We painted the walls ourselves. We argued about furniture and laughed about it later. I thought that kind of foundation meant something permanent. I thought shared struggle created loyalty. I didn't realize love can quietly expire while you're still paying the mortgage. By the 3rd month of Not Tonight, I started blaming myself. I joined a gym. I cut my hair closer. I tried cologne she once said she liked. I asked her if something was wrong between us. She sighed like I was bothering her. "Marcus, everything isn't about you," she said. That sentence hit harder than I expected. I wasn't trying to make it about me. I was trying to save us. But the more I tried, the more she withdrew. It felt like reaching for someone drifting out to sea while they insisted they weren't moving. One Friday night, I came home early from work with takeout from her favorite spot in Houston. The house was quiet, but her car was in the driveway. I walked in and heard her voice upstairs, soft, playful. I paused halfway up the stairs when I heard her say, "I miss you too." My chest tightened. When I stepped into the bedroom, she was sitting on the edge of the bed, phone pressed to her ear. She looked up and froze. "I'll call you later," she whispered quickly before hanging up. She didn't explain. She didn't have to. When I confronted her that night, she didn't deny anything. She leaned against the dresser and looked at me like I was asking stupid questions. "I've been unhappy for a long time," she said. "You just didn't notice." That felt unfair. I had been noticing everything. "Who is he?" I asked. She shrugged. "Someone who listens." That sentence tore through me. I listened to her for 8 years. I supported her. I sacrificed for her. But at that moment, none of it counted. She made it sound like I had failed some invisible test. The arguments became colder after that. Not loud screaming, just sharp, cutting statements. She accused me of being emotionally unavailable. She said I was too focused on work. She said she felt trapped. Every time I tried to defend myself, she'd say I was being defensive. It felt like walking through a maze where every turn led to blame. Meanwhile, she stayed glued to her phone. Late-night notifications buzzed constantly. When I asked again about the man, she rolled her eyes. "You're insecure," she said. I started questioning my own reality. On our 8th anniversary, I took the day off. I thought maybe we could reset. I booked dinner reservations in Houston at the restaurant where we celebrated our first anniversary. I bought her a simple gold bracelet. When I handed it to her that morning, she didn't smile. She looked irritated. "Marcus, we need to stop pretending," she said. That's when her cousin's truck pulled into the driveway. I didn't understand at first. Then her brother walked in without knocking. That's when I realized this wasn't a conversation. It was an eviction. They didn't even argue with me. They just started gathering my clothes, my shoes, my tools from the garage. Danielle stood there directing them like she was supervising movers. I asked her if she was serious. "I can't do this anymore," she replied flatly. "And I'm not leaving my house." My house, too, I wanted to shout. But something in her face told me she'd already rewritten the story in her head. I was the problem. I was the weight. I was the one who had to go. That night, I sat in my car parked on a quiet street near the house. The windows fogged up from my breath. I scrolled through old pictures of us smiling in Dallas, painting walls in Pearland, hugging in front of our first Christmas tree. I kept asking myself where it shifted. Was it gradual? Was there a moment I missed? The silence in the car was suffocating. I thought about knocking on the door and begging her to reconsider. But something in me broke, not in a loud way, but in a final way. The next morning, I rented a cheap motel room in Houston. The mattress sagged in the middle. The air conditioner rattled all night. I went to work pretending nothing was wrong. I told my supervisor I was dealing with family issues. I didn't tell anyone my wife had kicked me out. The shame felt heavy. I replayed her words over and over. I've been unhappy. I started wondering if love could be erased that easily. If 8 years could shrink into a trash bag on a driveway. During those lonely nights, I found myself driving past the old house. Not to confront her, just to see if her car was there. Sometimes it wasn't. That told me everything I needed to know. I imagined him sitting at my kitchen table, using the mugs we bought together. The anger would flare up, then collapse into exhaustion. I wanted to call her and demand answers. Instead, I turned my phone off more often. I realized chasing her would only make me smaller. What Danielle didn't know was that months before the separation, I had started restoring a classic Mustang in a rented garage in Sugar Land. It began as a hobby, something to clear my head. After she kicked me out, it became therapy. I spent every spare hour sanding metal, tuning engines, focusing on something I could fix. Unlike my marriage, the car responded to effort. If something was broken, I could trace the problem and repair it. That control grounded me when everything else felt chaotic. A local collector stopped by the garage one afternoon and asked about the Mustang. He offered to buy it before I even finished. The number he mentioned surprised me. I accepted. That sale led to another project, then another. Word spread quietly among collectors in Texas. I didn't advertise. I didn't post flashy updates. I just delivered quality work. The garage that once felt like an escape started looking like a future. For the first time since the eviction, I felt something other than loss. At this point, most people would have broken. If you respect a man who chooses silence over begging, subscribe right now. Because the comeback isn't loud, it's powerful. And you do not want to miss what happens next. Meanwhile, the divorce papers moved forward. I filed without telling Danielle first. I didn't want another argument. When she received the documents, she texted me only once. "So this is it?" I stared at the message for a long time. 6 months of "not tonight" echoed in my head. I typed nothing back. Silence had become my boundary. She didn't apologize. She didn't ask to reconcile. She just signed. It was as if she had been waiting for me to make it official. I later learned the man she was seeing was married. His wife found out. To save his own home, he cut Danielle off completely. I didn't hear that from her. I heard it from a mutual friend who still lived in Pearland. Apparently, Danielle was furious, not heartbroken, just furious. She had gambled on someone who wasn't willing to lose anything for her. I expected to feel satisfaction when I heard that. Instead, I felt empty. Her consequences didn't erase my pain. A few months after the divorce finalized, she tried calling late one night. I let it ring. Then she sent a message saying she just wanted to talk. I remembered standing in that driveway while her cousin tossed my belongings into a truck. I remembered sleeping in my car. I didn't respond. The silence I once feared had become my strength. I realized closure doesn't always come from conversations. Sometimes it comes from choosing not to reopen wounds. My business continued growing. I moved out of the motel and into a modest one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I paid the rent on time. I bought furniture slowly, piece by piece. There was peace in that simplicity. No tension in the air. No locked bathroom doors. No whispered phone calls. Just quiet evenings and the hum of possibility. I started waking up without that tightness in my chest. A year later, I had enough savings to think bigger. I partnered with an investor who believed in my work. We expanded into a larger space outside Sugarland. I hired 2 young mechanics from Houston who reminded me of myself years ago. I treated them with respect and paid them fairly. Building something steady felt better than trying to repair something broken. The focus sharpened me. I wasn't trying to prove Danielle wrong. I was trying to build a life that felt solid. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Danielle struggled to keep up with a mortgage alone. Without my income, the numbers didn't add up. She refused to downsize at first. Pride, maybe? Eventually, she had to sell the house in Pearland. The same house she told me to leave. I didn't drive by when it went on the market. I didn't need to. That chapter was closed. Karma doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just rearranges circumstances quietly. 2 years after the divorce, I bought a brick home in Missouri City. I paid in full. No joint account. No co-signer. Just me, when I held those keys in my hand. I thought about the night I slept in my car. I thought about trash bags on a driveway. The contrast was sharp, but grounding. This house wasn't about proving anything. It was about security. About knowing no one could force me out again. The last message Danielle ever sent read, "I didn't think you'd actually be okay without me." I read it once and deleted it. She never showed remorse. Not for the rejection. Not for the humiliation. Not for the betrayal. And maybe that's why my healing had to be separate from her. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. I stopped imagining alternate endings. The only ending that mattered was the one I was building. Looking back, those 6 months of not tonight were warnings. They were the slow unraveling of something already frayed. I used to think rejection defined me. Now I see it differently. Her distance forced me to confront parts of myself I'd ignored. My independence, my ambition, my boundaries. Pain became fuel. Silence became discipline. I didn't get revenge. I got stability. Sometimes people expect karma to be dramatic. They imagine public embarrassment or loud confrontations. But in my case, karma looked like a quiet garage filled with restored engines. It looked like steady contracts and paid invoices. It looked like waking up in a house I owned outright. Danielle chose someone who wouldn't risk anything for her. I chose myself. That's the difference. If I could speak to the man I was on that anniversary night, I'd tell him the driveway wasn't the end. It was a doorway. The humiliation felt permanent, but it wasn't. The loneliness felt unbearable, but it passed. What stayed was a lesson. Never beg to stay where you're tolerated. Never shrink yourself to keep someone comfortable. Love should not feel like auditioning for approval. Danielle never apologized. She never admitted fault. But life adjusted the scales without my interference. The house was gone. The relationship she risked everything for vanished. The support system she leaned on faded when things got hard. I didn't celebrate her struggles. I simply moved forward. Success doesn't need an audience. Healing doesn't require validation. On our anniversary, I gave her what she had been giving me for 6 months. Nothing. No fight. No pleading. No, desperate attempt to hold on. That nothing created space. And in that space, I rebuilt myself. Not louder, not flashier, just stronger. The silence that once felt like rejection became peace. Now, when I lock the door to my home in Missouri City at night, I feel something simple and powerful: security. No one can pack my life into trash bags here. No one can tell me to leave because they're chasing someone else. I earned this stability the hard way, and it means more because of that. The cruelest thing she did wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the eviction. It was making me feel disposable. But being discarded forced me to see my own value. I stopped defining myself by who wanted me. I started defining myself by what I built, and what I built stands firm. I don't hate Danielle. Hate takes energy I'd rather invest elsewhere. I don't wish her harm. I just wish for her distance. Some chapters end without reconciliation. Some lessons come without apologies. And sometimes the most powerful comeback is private, steady success. 6 months of not tonight led to one decisive not ever again. That was my answer. Quiet, final, and stronger than any argument we ever had. If the story hit you in the chest, share it with someone who needs to stop begging for love. And if you believe the strongest revenge is silent success, drop a fire in the comments. There's another story on your screen right now about a man who rebuilt after betrayal. Click it before you leave. Trust me, it's even crazier than this one.